Right, Carol, we might get started, I think.
Okay.
With a sufficient large amount of people here, and thank you everyone for being here, and thanks to people from our partner organisations in the project. It's really nice to see you. So I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional custodians of the land that I'm on today, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging of all the lands on which you guys are tuning in today. And we also have someone from New Brunswick in Canada, so also extending to the traditional owners of the lands there. Welcome to everyone. If you want to, please feel free to put the Indigenous owners of or custodians of the lands where you are today into the chat. That would be very interesting to see. So thank you very much. Well, we're mostly here today. I mean, I don't know, some people might just be looking for something to do during the lunch break, but we're mostly here today to listen from Carolyn, who is an expert in community connectors. I'm going to say that, Carolyn, and has had a lot of experience, I guess. Anthony McCosker and myself had the absolute privilege of working with Carolyn while she was doing her PhD on community connectors, and Carolyn is a true kind of boundary spanner, I guess, between practice and the strange arts of academic writing, etc. I'm not going to introduce who Carolyn thinks she is. She can do that herself. But today, what's going to happen today is we're going to have a presentation from Carolyn, and we're going to record that so we can put it up on our website. So the first bit might be a little less effective, but after that, we want it to be a real conversation and find out what all you guys have been doing around community connectors, or whatever the different terms that you are using for people. Have lots of dialogue and questions. Please feel free to use the chat at any point to put in a question or comment or thought or a resource. And yes, so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Carolyn.
Thank you, Jane. Well, I think you've introduced me enough. I think just to situate where I'm now, and it's true, we were the Mutual Admiration Society. I had an awesome supervision team. They had a very focused PhD candidate. So it's good to see Anthony and Jane here today. And look, it is a luxury to have that time to really devote yourself, your thinking, your reading, your practice to something that you're really interested in. So it was a great experience really digging into who are community connectors, what do they get up to, and what does that mean for those of us who work in health and community services. Right now, I am the General Manager at Merry Health, which is quite a large community health service based in mainly the northern suburbs and going right up to through the Hume region of Melbourne. And I'm the General Manager of, so I'm on the exec team, and my division's called Family and Community. And it's awesome to see some people who've joined today from Merry Health as well. And lots of familiar faces I know from my activities around. Andrew Butt and other Central Victorians just joined, so that's nice to see as well. I've started my timer. According to Jane, I've got about 15 minutes to make just a general presentation. And as Jane said, we will be then bouncing off that to take us through a few different explorations of what people's practice is. So I want to, and I'll do a little bit of screen sharing, which will be, you know, interesting and a bit chaotic, but that's fine. That adds to the fun. So what I want us really to think about today is, well, actually, let me start with my PowerPoint, because that always just gives us a focus. So I'm going to do screen share, and we ascertained, for some reason, it hates presenter mode. So let's go to here and here. So there you go, with screen sharing. And I want to kick off with just, and I think what if we use the chat might be easier, because I looked at, well, this is primarily a community of practice for the Activating Social Connection program. So to just get us thinking, why does social connection matter? Like, why are you all working on this? What's so important about social connection? If we just, maybe people put a few things in the chat rather than us all call out, that might be a better way to manage that. And let me see if I can read the chat because it's shrunk my vision down. Navigating Zoom while you're screen sharing is tricky. Okay, in the chat we've got, no one said yet why why social connection matters. Yep, health and well-being. Other people might be thinking, but I think that does actually cut right to the chase. That's why social connection has an inherent value and purpose for happier, longer lives, to people have access to resources, it captures diverse perspectives. Yeah, okay, we're on a roll now. So there's a whole bunch of reasons, but I always like to get back to why something matters, because then you go, well, if not everyone is socially connected, then maybe we've got a problem here. So why does social connection need activating? Now, I was feeling bold this morning. I was going to try getting us all to type into Slido. I always like to experiment live on an audience with tech I've never used, but today I think we won't do that. But maybe we'll keep with that same strategy of why does social connection, we very quickly establish, yes, it's important for a whole range of health and well-being issues, access to resources. So why do we need to activate it? Like, if it's so important, why isn't everyone just doing it? You know, why isn't everyone socially connected? What's going on?
Oops.
Yep, that's right. Someone's speaking up.
Am I supposed to be speaking or typing?
I think you are, Kate. It sounds like you're speaking. I know your voice and I can't even see your face. So how's that?
It's all right.
Yep. So why do we need to activate it?
I think there's a lot of barriers that tend to come up that as human beings, we put those barriers into place, whether that's something happening in the family, whether it's war, trauma, anything else that can happen to humans happens, and your social connection gets broken, and so therefore you need activating, whether it's yourself activating it, but often you need support to do that.
Yeah, thanks. So you've actually gone from individual right up to macro things, and that's coming up in the chat as well, whether it's individual barriers, things going on in society. So what I want to then do is get us thinking about, thinking about those issues through the lens of boundaries, boundary spanning and boundary work. And so to do that, I'm going to take us through the community connector framework and model. I'm going to move my camera since I'm looking over here. That was the output from that PhD research that got mentioned. So that research came about, it was in response to a real life issue. So a health service in Western Victoria had noticed they had lots of great programs. The sort of usual people were accessing them. There were pockets of the community that weren't accessing it, but they had realised there were some quite activated community members who were linking people up with services or just starting new things off their own bat. And so they were really wondering, are there more of these people out there? How could we perhaps link up with these really activated community members a bit more, and for the purpose of linking them with health services? So that got framed around the boundary spanning for health research. And so what I was able to do is go on a mission basically to find what we initially called community boundary spanners, because we use that notion of boundaries. People are disconnected from services because of a whole range of boundaries. So the research was based on going into a couple of community settings in Western Victoria and then replicating that methodology in Ireland to basically find community boundary spanners, which ended up being called community connectors, to see what they were doing. Were they linking people with health services? Were they open to doing that more? What sort of benefits and outcomes? And can you actually formalise this to any degree? What are the sort of main things you can pull out of what's going on the ground so that you could conceptualise it as a framework and a bit of a model that people in other places could also adapt and use? So that's where the community connector framework was developed, based on that research, interviews with about 32 different connectors, doing quite micro things. Some people just saying, oh, so-and-so's husband's died, we should invite them to our yellow bin day, which is where we all meet, the day we put our yellow bins out at the local cafe, right up to people who established, you know, new exercise groups or disability transport programs. People were doing quite a diverse and creative range of things and creating these connections. So I'm going to now stop this share, and I wanted to step you through, because the Community Connector framework and the model is all sitting beautifully on a website, which you can all access anytime you want. And I'm just going to step us through it because that seems the easiest way to go. So I'm sharing again. So now you should all be seeing the website. So basically, this framework's been developed to illustrate how health care and community care professionals, and I'm including local government in this because I know we've got a few local government people present today. How can you tap into the boundary spanning activities of community connectors for the purpose of improving access to health and community services? So the foundational thing, and we touched on this, you know, social connection is important, but it needs activation. Equally, social connection is part of what helps you access services and supports. So if we start by thinking about this whole construct of boundaries, and boundaries are ways of describing who we are as individuals or who we are as collectives. They give us that sort of edge around who we are and what we do. So we know organisational boundaries pretty well. They are the sorts of things, we've got policies and strategies, we've got professional roles, we've got particular language that we use, we have funding guidelines, we have a whole bunch of things which say we're here for this purpose to deliver these programs under these conditions to these people and not to those people. We do this, but we don't do that. And we have these skills, but not those skills. And that's good, it gives clarity. So you know if you go to the doctors what they will and won't do, if you come to Merry Health what we will and won't do. But obviously those boundaries can become quite rigid and perhaps difficult for some people to navigate. There are obviously, within the workplace as well, but in all of our lives, there are social boundaries. So we categorise people all the time on the basis of things like their income, their gender, their race, employment status. And these sort of social boundaries are framed by our cultural boundaries. So they're indicators, people's language, religion, and dress code sort of frame these broader social boundaries. So sometimes I've, in my writing, ended up mushing social and cultural to talk about socio-cultural boundaries. But they're the things that apply in our everyday life, and they play out in communities, they play out in societies, and they do creep into our organisational settings as well, obviously. And then people do think of boundaries as, you know, actual walls, but they're the more physical things that also define particularly a service, its presence, its availability, those sorts of things. So starting by thinking of boundaries is helpful because then you're starting to think about who's able to get from, because boundaries can stick us or become actually quite rigid. And so we're talking about, well, who's able to navigate those boundaries or cross those boundaries? And in the instance I was looking at, it was wanting to look at what some individuals in the community are capable of. So the community connectors, so our definition of community connectors are active community members, people who value participation. They span boundaries that exist in a community between groups and organisations. And so I haven't used stock photos. I always like looking into the website because I get to see some friendly and familiar faces, which is nice. And so what I found is there are some really common elements to what these, particularly the 32 community connectors I studied in depth, and knowing subsequent work we've done and the work we're doing at Merry Health, work I've done in Castlemaine and other settings following this research, you do see these same three patterns in what people are doing as community connectors. They are people who identify and relate to people not connected in the community. Not everyone does that. I mean, we're often aware of people that are disconnected, but we're like, I don't want to talk to them. I don't know who they are. That's not part of my world. But community connectors are the ones who, for various motivations, are not only see who's not connected, but they will do something about it. So they move into connecting people with other people, with information groups and organisations. And they're also at the same time often enabling people. It could be through quite practical, providing emotional, social, or practical support. But I also saw a lot of people, then they would advocate on behalf of a group or an individual that they, or a problem or an issue. They would actually support people through education or educate people in our roles as service providers to say, hey, this is going on, you need to change or adapt what you're doing. So I saw that in place across all of the connectors to different degrees, obviously. If you're interested, there's some little film clips of people sort of bringing that to life. And also what community connectors are good at doing is using places and objects to facilitate those connections. So whether that's media or physical places like neighbourhood houses or libraries and so on. So that's a really quick picture of what, just sort of that snapshot of what community connectors are just naturally doing because of who they are and what they value. So, okay, community connectors definitely exist. There's patterns to their behaviour. That identify, connect, enable. So if now why we're here is as service providers, we're wanting to activate social connection, often with people that we're not linked with. So who are those intermediaries? How do we actually get from the boundaries of our own organisations and practice to actually link in with people that are hardly reached, that are socially disconnected? So we've got to go and find community. So one option is, why don't we just mirror what community connectors are doing to actually identify our local connectors, connect with them, and then have that ongoing relationship with them and enable that. So this is probably the biggest thing, to spending all that time on the research and going, this is just such an everyday practical thing. It makes so much sense, and not many people are doing it. And when I tried to apply this own framework in my own town in Castlemaine, with Castlemaine Health, which I was on the board, I was the chair of, still took us about 6 or 7 months to get this through the layers of the organisation, get buy-in to go, what if we just spent some time to identify our local connectors? And what if we actually did that with some other health services and local government? And what if we brought a few local connectors together and our service providers together and had a bit of a forum, find out what people are doing, what are the issues, let's share some information. We actually ended up doing that. And here's some of the little tools we developed along the way. But even then, so that kind of, and that's what we'll get into, is if this is so simple and obvious, there's got to be a reason why more of us aren't doing it. So, you know, even just that step to agree to identify your local connectors can take a bit of time to get that off the ground. Connecting with them, obviously you need that trust. We need to have staff. So there's no point who finds your community connectors in the community. Your connector staff do that. And there's people in this workshop today who that's your role, is to go out and to build that trust, build those relationships, you know, make things sort of simple, and then enable those ongoing relationships with a consistent point of contact and really working where connectors are. So it's not just getting everyone in the door to our place, getting out to where people are. And, you know, if people need a meeting room or a bus or childcare or those sorts of things, enable those activities, add to what's already working and in progress, rather than necessarily wanting just to shoehorn people back into what we're doing and we think is the appropriate source of social connection or health services. So that's the sort of, and I'll probably circle back to this, but the last bit, which is we also hopefully get to touch on today, is obviously if you're going to invest the time to have staff to identify your local connectors, connect with them, have that ongoing support, let's hope it's making a difference. And let's measure that, and let's adapt our sort of actions if we're not making sufficient difference. And these are the domains we need to look at impact over. We need to see for the people that, whether it's social activation, whether it's bringing people in to have better knowledge and access to health services, what sort of changes and benefits are we seeing for those individuals? The really interesting one is the benefits for the connectors themselves. And I know at Mary Health with the Community Champions, one of our programs, been working with a really awesome group of 10 women, and there's 5 we're still working with after over a year. The evaluation report, which is here, written by the awesome Kat Thorne from our organisation, definitely encourage you to read that, just doing a plug for Kat, it really does pick up the benefit for connectors as well. Hopefully you're seeing better reach for your own organisation, and longer term, these are harder ones to measure but really important. And I know, for example, Fiona, in a previous role you've had with the Opening Doors program, you could definitely speak to some of these changes through the connectors that you're working with. The last page on the website has a link to published journal articles and little diagrams and 1 pages and 2 pages and that sort of thing. So really encourage you in your own time to sort of dip in and move around through that just to see some practice examples. I want then to get us now, there's plenty more I could say, but I think what would be more interesting is to run this little poll, and hopefully you're all seeing it. So I would really like to know, of all of the people in the room here, the Zoom room, how many of you are currently collaborating with unpaid community connectors? So not people who are in your own organisation, but how many of you are going out and finding your community connectors or community boundary spanners? So at least one person is, and the whole poll's running all at once. Aha!
I've lost my connection here. I don't know what's happening. Okay, so here we go. Yes.
Yeah.
I can't fill it out. I put yes, and then it won't let me submit.
It won't let you submit?
Not without filling out.
Yeah, I understand.
That's about no.
Okay, let's do the whole lot then.
Oh,
Yes, that's what even I faced. I put in yes and it's not letting me submit.
Okay, so we've got 2, then we've got a next lot of questions, which is what's stopping or might stop your organisation from collaborating with community connectors?
And none of those things are stopping us.
That is awesome to hear from someone.
Yeah, same here. Yep.
we have too much
Let
red.
me, can you all see the poll result?
I can't know.
Okay, I'll do a
No.
share screen and I'll show you how the poll's looking. Dum, dum, dum. There it is.
Collaborating.
There we go. So in this current
I
Zoom
can
room.
just
I
see
can't see it.
the boundary spanning website, Carolyn.
Yeah, me too.
But I stopped sharing. Okay. Share screen 2. All right, I'm going to have one more go. Can you see that one now?
No,
No, it's not, is it?
Still the website.
no,
Participants can now see your screen. Can you see the Community Connect, the poll?
no.
No.
Still
Alright,
your
Can you,
website.
can you
Alright,
shut
I
that?
will-
Can you shut that one down? Maybe we'll see it.
Shouldn't be able to share 2 things at once. What I'll tell you is what people are saying, and I'll end the poll. So what we've got in the room is 8 entities who are working with unpaid community connectors and 7 who aren't. So sort of a bit of 50-50. So not everyone's totally in that space of applying the community connector framework the way I've talked about it, but half of you are. And it's a pretty even split across why people are not collaborating with community connectors. It's whether we don't have the staff to identify and be a contact point for connectors, or we're not ready to change and adapt our services in response to what connectors tell us. We don't have the resources to support connector-led activities, a few people saying that. And the one that's the biggest barrier for people in this room is we've got too much red tape to formalise relationships with connectors, which we'll be getting through your police checks, working with children's checks, volunteer recruitment policies, NDIS checks, those kinds of things that often can hold people back. So, all right, I'll end that poll. And what I might do, Jane, is leave the presentation there and open it up to that broader discussion then on what some of our people present are doing. So